What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. I haven't made one of these in a while. For some reason, I felt like you guys were fed up with them, and I decided to wait a while before I made another one. I will make more of these in the future, and I'll let you guys decide which year I should do next. I made one on 2007, 2009, and 10 technically, 2016 technically, 2003, 2005, and 2008. Now, in these videos, I talk about a year in general, and I mention some of the most memorable moments in feuds of that year. So I don't talk about literally everything. I just talk about the most memorable things that occurred during that year. May leave out some stuff and whatnot, but I get most of the moments in there. Right now, let's go back to 2006, which was a time in WWE that I am fond of. Like, I really love that year. 2006, the year that saw Edge finally climb to the top of the mountain, Kurt Angle leaving WWE, The Undertaker reaching his peak. Like, after his return at Survivor Series 2005, The Undertaker had some awesome matches. I consider 2005 to 2011 to be his peak years. John Cena was despised by the smart fans and basically older fans. They hated his guts. Mark Henry returned and he got injured again. ECW relaunched, and that's what I'm going to be talking about first. ECW. Who thought it was a great idea to relaunch it? Now, let me give you a refresher as to how ECW returned. In 2004, WWE released the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD. This DVD had a documentary about ECW and some matches from the defunct company. That DVD sold so well, and from there, WWE planned on a reunion show for ECW. That show was booked for June 12, 2005, and it was called ECW One Night Stand. That show did well, and there were plans for a relaunch of ECW. Shane McMahon thought it would be a good idea to stream the show on WWE.com. That was about to be the home of ECW, but Vince decided to find a place for it on network television. Sci-Fi was the channel, and ECW was set. Now, Paul Heyman did book the show, but it was Vince who had the final say. ECW was kinda doomed from the start. There was a zombie on the show, cause, it was on Sci-Fi. Matches ended in DQ, and some of the main events didn't feature ECW talent. Also, Rob Van Dam and Sabu got busted for weed and pills, which basically destroyed any plans ECW had for the two. Now, these are some problems ECW had, but the biggest problem came at December to Dismember. That show was pure trash, and Heyman was blamed for it despite not being the one who booked it. I mean, did Paul want Bobby Lashley to be the one who held the title at the end of the night? I'm pretty sure he wanted to see on Punk or RVD. Also, he wanted Punk to eliminate Big Show in the first minutes, but those plans were thrown out by Vince. The two argued on a plane the next day, and from there, they went their separate ways. ECW was written by Dusty Rhodes from there on, I think, and to be honest, I felt like it became better. I mean, for the next few months, it wasn't great, but after Vengeance, it sort of became what NXT is nowadays, and it was really entertaining. Alright, we got ECW out of the way. Now let's focus on that weird Kane versus Kane storyline, like the Imposter Kane thing. What was that? Kane was complaining about May 19th, and he was assaulting anyone who mentioned it. After May 19th, an Imposter Kane came out and he tormented Kane for a couple of weeks. This led to a match between those two at Vengeance. Imposter Kane won, and it was assumed that the feud was over. But the next night, Kane assaulted the Imposter and took back his mask. That's it. I had to mention it because it was one of the weirdest things that happened in 2006. That's it, it's done. Moving on from that bizarre feud, let me mention Rey Mysterio's title reign. Now, I will make a video on this in the future, but for right now, let me give you a summary of Rey Mysterio's title reign. Rey Mysterio, after Eddie's death, was seen by many as the guy who should win the Rumble. He won the match, and he went on to face Kurt Angle and Randy Orton for the world title at WrestleMania. Rey won that match to become the new champion. The master of the 619's title reign was off to a good start. He beat Randy Orton clean in his first title defense, but from there, he was in this feud with JBL that basically destroyed his momentum. During the feud, JBL had Rey face some bigger opponents. Rey lost every single time, and it basically destroyed him. Now, Rey did beat JBL twice, and I think he even beat Mark Henry on a June episode of SmackDown, but the damage was done. Rey then feuded with King Booker, and that's who he lost the title to. Speaking of King Booker, let's talk about him since we are done with Rey. King Booker. One of the most entertaining characters of 2006 for me. Now, for me to talk about Booker, we have to mention how he became king. Like every other king, he won King of the Ring. This time though, his vocabulary and his accent changed. Like basically his gimmick changed entirely. He wasn't just that heel king, he became a British king. He had this British accent that he would ditch once he was booked in a match. He was fake British basically. He claimed to be royalty, and he didn't call himself the 5-time WCW champion. Booker's run as king wouldn't get going until the July 7, 2006 episode of SmackDown, which was the night he won a Battle Royal, which made him #1 contender. King Booker from there faced Rey at the Bash, and he won the title after Chavo Guerrero literally threw a chair in Rey's face. Oh my god, that was one of the most brutal chair shots you'll ever see. And finally, Booker became world champion in WWE. It was a long time coming. He should have won the title earlier, but late is better than never, cause think about it. What if he didn't win the title? Now, following the title win, Booker began a feud with Batista. Before I get into that feud, let me mention that real fist fight that happened between the two at some SummerSlam commercial shoot. Rumor has it, Batista thought highly of himself, and this rubbed Booker the wrong way. They had a legit fist fight after they confronted one another, and that fight left both men swollen, and I think Batista had a black eye. Rumor has it that Booker won the fight. They agreed to work normally afterwards, and the two feuded for months. I believe there was only one memorable match from that feud, well, at least for me. It was that fatal 4-way match at No Mercy that also involved Finlay and Bobby Lashley. Batista would continue to chase the title until Survivor Series, where he won it in a last chance match. And that was it for King Booker being a main eventer. He fell down the card slowly, and he began feuding with Kane, and he was just on SmackDown. He was just there by mid-2007. Like, he was just there. That's it. Moving on from King Booker, let me mention the SmackDown pay-per-view, The Great American Bash. That pay-per-view was screwed once some guys got sick. Bobby Lashley got elevated liver enzymes, which meant that he won't face Finlay. Gregory Helms didn't face Super Crazy. Instead, he faced Matt Hardy. Great Khali was booked in a Punjabi prison match against The Undertaker, and that didn't even happen. Big Show replaced them, which was quite bizarre. Now, all of these guys weren't medically cleared to compete, but there's more. Batista was supposed to face Mark Henry in a match on the pay-per-view, but on Saturday night's main event, Mark Henry suffered an injury which left him sidelined for a year. Basically, Great American Bash 2006 was screwed. I will say though that it was a decent pay-per-view despite these changes. Like, it was kind of decent. While SmackDown had these kinds of issues, Raw had DX and the Spear Squad main eventing vengeance. Now, the Spear Squad were the jobbers, and they always got their ass kicked by DX. As for DX, they finally reformed. They teased this at WrestleMania 22 and both men did a DX chop, so it was a sign that it was time for these two to team up. Like, 8 years. They haven't teamed up in 8 years. And finally, they reformed on the June 12, 2006 episode of Raw. Triple H was getting his ass kicked by the Spear Squad when Vince called for Mitch of the Spear Squad to come down to the ring. He was thrown out to the stage by someone, and that someone was Shawn Michaels, who returned after being a few weeks out. Michaels ran down to the ring, and he and Triple H cleared house. They then reformed DX to the dismay of Mr. McMahon. Over the next couple of weeks, DX played some sophomore pranks on the Spear Squad, the coach, and Mr. McMahon. This led to a tag team match between all of the members of the Spear Squad and DX. Obviously, DX won. Like, what did you think? Spear Squad was going to halt their momentum? Like, impossible. From there, DX pranked the McMahons, and there were some entertaining segments like the one where DX impersonated the McMahons. And what about when DX got kicked off of Raw? Then again, some people didn't like this DX run, and what can I say? Like, you either like it or you dislike it. I will say, though, that when DX got serious, they were absolutely vicious, like the Hell in a Cell match. That match was pretty brutal, so it was clear that once DX stopped the jokes, they are dangerous. After that McMahon's feud, DX began a feud with Rated-RKO. Rated-RKO formed due to DX, because they cost them the title, and Edge had to mention that Triple H took Randy Orton's title 2 years beforehand, so yeah. Rated-RKO handed DX their first loss at Cyber Sunday. Now, Edge and Orton turned this feud into a blood feud by hitting the concerto on Ric Flair. From there, it was a bloody and vicious feud that led to a match at New Year's Revolution. Triple H tore his quad once again during that match, which made Shawn Michaels lead the way. That match felt like a war, and that match was also the end of DX's run. I think they were going to split anyways because it was the road to WrestleMania, and Triple H was going to face John Cena in a rematch though. Like, I think they were done. Moving on from DX, let me mention Kurt Angle. This was such a shocking release. Like, Kurt Angle was on top of his game in 2006. He was at his peak in the ring, but outside the ring, Kurt was at his worst. Like, he took 65 pills in a day. I'm not sure if it was during this time period, but that's a lot regardless. Now, the release might have been the best thing for Kurt because he was burnt out. He was exhausted, and yeah, like, he needed the break. Now, I believe they expected Kurt to return for WrestleMania season, but he decides to sign with Impact. TNA had a lighter schedule, but I don't think they had a wellness policy. Now, the wellness policy is something that WWE implemented after the death of Eddie Guerrero, so yeah. Kurt Angle had some of his best matches in TNA, so there's that. I talked about this in depth in another video which you could go and check out. Now, we all know about 2006's main eventers, but what about the mid-carders? WWE's mid-card scene in 2006 was filled with up-and-coming guys. Shelton Benjamin, Carlito, Mr. Kennedy, MVP, Bobby Lashley, Umaga, and Johnny Nitro. Sadly, almost every one of those mid-carders didn't reach their potential. I mean, it might not be the talent's fault, maybe WWE just didn't want to push them. And I consider 2006 and 2009 to be lost generations because WWE built up some stars and they completely destroyed them in the following years. Now, following this talk about mid-carders, let me talk about one of the better feuds of 2006. Ric Flair versus Mick Foley. Now, the reason why this feud is such a good feud is because this one was actually real. Mick Foley didn't like Ric Flair. He's disliked him since his days in WCW because Flair didn't really see potential in Foley because Flair was a booker. Foley didn't like this, and he wrote in his book that Ric Flair was every bit as bad on the booking side of things as he was great on the wrestling side of it. Flair decided to respond to this in his book by calling Foley a glorified stuntman. Now, these two took shots at each other in the book, but backstage in late 2004, Foley confronted Flair asking if he could sign a book that's going to be auctioned off to charity. Flair was going to sign it, but he asked Foley to shake his hand. He refused to shake it, and Flair didn't like this, so he decided to throw a punch. The two were restrained by officials, and they began cutting promos on each other. 2 years later, these two were set to feud with one another. This time though, Foley was the heel and Flair was the babyface. Foley challenged Flair to a wrestling match at Vengeance. Also, that match was going to be a 2 out of 3 falls match because Foley wanted to show off his wrestling skills. Flair won the first fall, but Foley got himself disqualified to give Flair the second fall. The feud wouldn't end there as they faced off in an I Quit match at SummerSlam. That match was so damn brutal. Flair looked like a madman out there. Foley promised to never say I quit, but after Flair threatened Melina, he said it. And that was it for the feud. I didn't go into detail with it because this video is about 2006 in general. Like, I can't be wasting time on very detailed stuff. That stuff is good enough for its own video. Moving on from that underrated feud, let me mention who my breakout star of the year was. Mickie James. That's who I think became a star in 2006. She started off the year as Trish Stratus's friend, but then that turned into something else. She wanted to kiss her and stuff, but then Trish didn't want to. Then she attacked her, and that led to a match at WrestleMania between the two. That match was pretty good, and Mickie ended up winning the title. She held the title for about 4 months before Lita took the title off of her. She ended up winning it back from Lita at Survivor Series and Lita's final match. So it was a good year for Mickie James. Now, I just have to mention Lita's departure. Crime Time sold off her panties and her personal belongings, and even JBL bought some stuff. So it was an embarrassing way for the 4-time women's champion to go out. Like, why'd they ever do that? It's kind of disrespectful. It's sad. She won the title 4 times, yet she's going out like this. Come on. Before I end this video, I'm just gonna mention 2 feuds from 2006. First up is Randy Orton and Hulk Hogan. I still think Orton should have won this one to this day, because he was a legend killer and it would have helped him greatly if he beat Hulk Hogan. It makes sense. This one started when Orton said that Hogan's daughter is hot. He implied that he wanted a date with Brooke Hogan. He also said that if her dad has a problem with that, then he'll find out why he's the legend killer. At Saturday night's main event, Orton handed Brooke a rose and he challenged Hulk Hogan to a match at SummerSlam. Hogan accepted and it was on. Later that night, Orton RKO'd Hogan on the trunk of his car. Over the next couple of weeks, the Legend Killer made fun of Hogan and his family. One segment in particular was pretty funny. It was basically Orton messing around and making fun of the Hogan family, but it wasn't really them. At SummerSlam, Hulk Hogan beat Randy Orton. I believe this was the last match Hogan had in WWE, yet it doesn't feel memorable. I don't know why, but I always think of Hogan and HBK, not Hogan and Orton, yet this happened during the same time period. Now, Orton should have won this. Hogan didn't even compete again, so that's the reason why I think Orton should have won this one. Plus, it would have helped him cement his legacy as the Legend Killer. Now, moving on from that, I'm just gonna talk about one final thing. Edge and John Cena's feud. Edge's 2006 was awesome. He started off the year as Mr. Money in the Bank. Then at New Year's Revolution, he cashed in the briefcase on a vulnerable John Cena to become the new WWE champion. 2006, for some reason, was the year that Edge, RVD, and King Booker finally made it to the top. They all should have made it earlier, but it was good nonetheless because they deserved it. Edge became the Rated R superstar and the most watched WWE champion of all time. Now, the reason why he calls himself that is because I believe the day or the week he became WWE champion, WWE.com got 30 million views. So maybe he is the most watched or viewed champion in history. Edge's title reign ended at the Royal Rumble. He lost it to John Cena. From there, Cena went on to face Triple H while Edge feuded with Mick Foley. That feud with Foley saw Edge become a star. That hardcore match did wonders for the Rated R Superstar's career. While Edge was spearing Foley through a table, John Cena was being booed in Chicago. Seriously, that Chicago crowd rooted for Triple H. The same Triple H who had the Reign of Terror, so they'd rather have him as champ than John Cena. That's how much they hated him. The second Cena made Triple H tap out, the Allstate Arena was stunned. They were like, huh? He made him tap out? Now, basically, I think if Triple H won, then Cena would have never recovered from it and he would have never became the face of the company. That's just my opinion. All it takes is one loss and your career could fall apart. Well, not fall apart, but you get what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that he wasn't going to be the face of the company. Following this, Cena and Edge crossed paths once again as Edge was set to defend the WWE title against both Edge and Triple H in a triple threat match at Backlash. This was one of the most entertaining triple threat matches ever. It was bloody, it was rough, it was violent, it was simply one of WWE's best matches from 2006. Cena ended up barely retaining the title, and after that, Edge went on to team up with Mick Foley while Cena moved on to a feud with RVD. We all know how that feud turned out for RVD. At ECW One Night Stand, Edge cost John Cena the WWE Championship by spearing him through a table. Van Dam capitalized on this by hitting the 5-star frog splash to become the new champion. He screwed himself over a couple of weeks later by being caught in possession of some weed and some pills. He was forced to lose the title to Edge on the July 3rd episode of Raw. So, Edge finally became a 2-time champion. He deserved it because of his work with Foley, and he was the best heel on Raw at the time. From there, Edge and Cena continued their feud, and at SummerSlam, Edge was set to defend the title against the former champ. Before the match, Edge went to Cena's house and he slapped his father. Down goes Cena. Down goes Cena. Who remembers that? Edge ended up retaining the title in Cena's hometown by blasting the former champ with some brass knucks. The feud continued, and the next night, Lita threw John Cena's spinner title into the Long Island Sound. The Rated R Superstar then revealed a Rated R title. Later that night, Cena managed to throw Edge into the Long Island Sound, and this feud was awesome basically at this point. Like, it was amazing. We seen a fight in hotels. We seen Edge slap Cena's dad in his house. We seen Cena throw Edge in the Long Island Sound. Like, it was awesome. Following this, Cena managed to get a title shot against Edge, but if he lost, then he moves to SmackDown. Edge accepted, but under his conditions. He then announced a TLC match later that night. In his hometown of Toronto, Edge faced John Cena in a TLC match. That match was their best match up to that point, and I'd say it was Cena's best match up to that point. Edge brought this intensity in Cena, and it just made for some really fun segments and matches. Like, he just inspired him to, like, be better. The majority hated Edge, including me. I just despised that man like nobody else. I've never hated someone as much as I did with Edge. Anyways, Cena won that TLC match, and the feud was basically over. I covered that feud in a previous video, and that's about their entire feud, 2006 to 2009. And that's it for this video. 2006 had some awesome feuds and awesome moments, but it also had some weird things happen, like ECW, Kane versus Kane, Shelton Benjamin's mom, like that storyline. Like, there was some weird stuff that went on in 2006. And there were some bad things like December to Dismember, that was horrendous. Like, there were some terrible things that happened during this year. But the amazing stuff like Edge and Cena's feud and Kurt Angle and The Undertaker No Way Out and stuff like that, that was awesome. So, this year was decent, I guess. I just say it's decent. Like, it's up to you guys. What do you think about 2006? Comment it down below. Also, what was the best pay-per-view of 2006? You guys tell me your opinion in the comments down below. My favorite pay-per-view was Unforgiven. It's my favorite pay-per-view of all time, and I just loved it. Like, there was a Hell in a Cell match and a TLC match on the same pay-per-view, so I just loved it, and I used to watch that DVD so damn much. So yeah, that's it for this video. Make sure you hit an RKO on the like button, and perhaps an FU on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.